Can we fix it? Apparently not, but OSHA can. This is the story of how I and some co-workers caused a massive OSHA investigation that ended up costing the paper mill we worked at millions of dollars and several higher-ups their jobs. Edit. I should probably clarify for those unfamiliar that OSHA stands for Occupational Safety and Health Administration, a US government organization that enforces various rules about workplaces designed to make them reasonably safe. This was years ago when I worked security at a local paper mill, which I have posted some stories of elsewhere, specifically at Artalis from security. One of our many duties was to patrol through the mill and keep an eye out for safety hazards. One such was that the roof leaked like a sieve. When it rained, there would be cascades of water falling from the ceiling and forming pools of sometimes ankle-deep water all over the place. This would be issue enough, but some of these waterfalls of annoyance fell on electrical boxes. High voltage boxes specifically. The boxes were sealed enough that nobody got electrocuted, but it was only a matter of time until it happened. And I'm honestly surprised it never did, given how poorly they were maintained at the time. I and the other security personnel had made reports of it every time it rained, but nothing was ever done about it, and the workers were as pissed about that as we were. It all came to a head during hurricane season. As my name might imply, I'm from the Gulf Coast where some pretty bad hurricanes have passed through. This particular year we had some pretty torrential rains pass through that had made the mill much resemble the swamp that surrounds it. It was so bad that the pit and the mechanics bay flooded and had to be pumped out. Several months before this we had had a person electrocuted due to faulty lockout procedures. So nobody was willing to take chances with those HV boxes standing in what was now a 5-inch deep pool of water. Rather than filing yet another report, my supervisor decided to speak directly with the safety director about it. His response was that they had passed all their inspections and if OSHA hadn't seen it as a problem, then it wasn't a problem and the people who had been avoiding walking through the accidents waiting to happen were just being babies. Furthermore, he instructed us to stop reporting the same stuff to him over and over. If we thought it was such a big deal, then we should take it to someone who could fix it. We knew he meant to the maintenance department, but that's not what he said. It should be noted at this point that when I did my patrols I made it a point to stop and chat with folks and had built up a good rapport with many of them. They knew what was going on in their areas, and they'd often tell me about stuff that should be included in my reports that I might have missed or had little way of knowing. So it was that when I innocently that's my story and I'm sticking to it related to some of the guys in those areas what had been said, we got some ideas. I didn't know the term malicious compliance back then, but the concept was not foreign. We took pictures of the boxes, complete with warning labels, corroded conduits, and the veritable lakes around them. Then each of us filed complaints with OSHA about unsafe working conditions. OSHA takes their job very seriously. A couple weeks later I show up for my shift to a fucking swarm of activity. OSHA is there for a full inspection. See, every time they'd had an inspection before, the mill had been able to steer the inspectors away from certain areas, but not this time. This isn't just some passive see anything? Nope, not really inspection. This is a full-on extra long gloves, bend over the table. You might feel a slight pressure as the proctologist, whose fingers look to each be the size of bananas, fists you up to the elbow inspection. It drags on for days. In the end the mill had to replace the roofs, ventilation, some catwalks that were so close to falling apart they could have run for public office. Multiple failsafes that had been stuck open for so long that they'd rusted into uselessness. The corroded storage racks, you really don't want the multi-ton rolls of paper making a break for it. A huge portion of the electrical system, the fire suppression system, the goddamn HS sensors which had apparently not worked in years, and a bunch of other stuff I don't remember offhand. But you get the idea. Edit HS is hydrogen sulfide gas. Poisonous, corrosive, and highly flammable. Plants and mills where it is present utilize sensors to alert personnel when the concentration of the gas gets too high. Exposure to high concentrations can cause long-term damage and or death, or can cause explosions. It is very common at paper mills and causes the rotten egg smell that paper mills are known for. The bill totals in the millions of dollars, both in actually getting up to par and in penalties imposed on the company. The head of safety got canned without severance from what I heard, and the assistant director of operations retired shortly afterward. I don't know what, if anything, happened to the director himself. Of course he had connections even further up the chain. All because the head of safety told us to take it to someone who can fix it. Well, we did. OSHA regulations may be a balash sometimes, but they've got your back when the company is being run by Dow chickenos. Violent teacher getting the apology he requested. Some background. This is something that happened to me almost 20 years ago, and it happened in Morocco. I remembered it recently as I told it to friends and thought this would be the perfect place for it. Also, this is my first post here. Also, there's a TLDR at the bottom. I was 16 years old and it was the first day of school, 5th year at that particular school. I got a physics class. Everyone is sitting in class and chatting when the teacher comes in, so everyone stops talking and waits for the teacher to sit. He sits down, scans the room, sees me, points at me and says, "You out," kicking me out of the class. Obviously I hadn't done anything and I didn't understand why I was getting kicked out for no reason. On the first day of class by this teacher I didn't know. In one of my favorite subjects, and I was a nerd and never had any issues with any teachers and never got kicked out of class before. So I argue, the teacher doesn't want to give a reason but eventually says it's because I was talking. And I re-argue saying that I didn't, and the entire class was talking up until the time he entered the room, but he is relentless, refuses to start the class until I'm out. I hold my ground, I refuse to leave, and he holds his ground and eventually tells the class that he won't begin until I leave. Expecting everyone to pressure me to leave the class so they could finally learn. Unfortunately for him, the class was very sympathetic with me. And 16 years old are not eager to start learning anyway, so everyone was murmuring, "Don't let him bully you," and good, no class and stuff like that, which just pissed him off even more. After sitting for 15 minutes staring at each other, him waiting for me to leave, and me waiting for him to begin class, he eventually stood up. Walked over to my chair 3rd row, and before I realized what was happening, picked me up by the collar, yanked me out of the chair, and threw me all the way to smash against the blackboard in the front of the classroom. I fell limp to the ground and he dragged me on the floor all the way to the door and threw me out as I slid a few meters down the corridor, then closed the door behind him. Let's just say I was pissed. I called my father, who came rushing to the school with murderous intent. A colleague from work came with him and was there to prevent him from doing anything he might regret. Never hurt someone's child. They went into the principal's office. Lots of screaming and arguing. Eventually the teacher finished the class and joined us in the principal's office, but the arrogant bastard wanted me kicked out of his class permanently. He refused to apologize. He held his ground against the principal and my father's anger, but eventually relented with, "I'll let him come back to class next week on the condition that he apologizes to me in front of the entire class," with a smirk on his face. I had my own smirk on my face and told my father to let it go. I accept the terms. We'd been screaming at each other for over 2 hours with the principal teacher father. The following week I come to class. He had his stupid arrogant face, smiling, thinking he was humiliating me. He stood just behind me in front of the class. As everyone in class sat and waited for my speech, which obviously everyone knew was happening because I spent the week talking to everyone in class about what had happened and the terms he had set out, etc. So I deliver a speech that was Shakespearean, very embellished, very sarcastic, and so perfect. Things like, "I would like to bow my head in front of you all in shame and apologize profusely for the incredible tort I inflicted upon our teacher last week. I have sullied my good name by daring to open my mouth before he came into the room, and I have offended our beloved teacher. I apologize for it, and I hope that everyone here can pardon my transgressions and understand how remorseful I am," etc. Obviously I'm paraphrasing since I can't remember the speech from 20 years ago, but I was 100% compliant. Probably less sarcastic obvious than what I just wrote. But more than enough for the entire class to be laughing their asses off silently cause everyone was scared of him, but there were some chuckles escaping here and there. He obviously understood that I had complied but that I ended up humiliating him and that I wasn't humiliated in the least and doing that speech in front of all the class. But he had nothing to answer to it, he could not reply or complain, and I know that he didn't want to start another argument with my father and the principal. The issue had basically made me immune to anything from him. Note, we later learned that he was my sister's teacher the year before and that he had just been demoted, and that was the biggest insult to his arrogant ass that he could get. And false rumors had been apparently floating around that my sister and 2 others had complained about him and were the cause for why he got that demotion. I can't say I know 100% why he acted that way, but I'm pretty sure it was because he thought my sister was to blame for his demotion and he wanted to get revenge on me. There are no other explanations. Other note, as I said in the beginning, this was 20 years ago and it was in Morocco. So the fact that the teacher got violent was not really as shocking as it would have been in North America, though it had been unheard of in our school. TLDR. Teacher kicked me out of class for no reason, and when I refused to leave, he got violent and literally threw me out. He then requested that if I were to get admitted back into his class, I had to apologize to him in front of everyone for disturbing the class as a way to humiliate me. I apologized, but with such sarcasm and maliciousness, and since everyone knew I was not at fault, it ended up humiliating him instead, but I had complied and he had nothing to say.